Alright, here we're set up to make a bottle stopper. I took the initial blank, I sanded the bottom on the belt sander. That way I knew I had a good smooth surface. I drilled a 12.5 millimeter hole in it. I made the hole a little bit larger than what the brass insert required. For wood, they make them a little tighter, but wood is a little more forgiving. With the acrylics, I didn't want to crack this, so I made it to where it would just drop in. I used some two-part epoxy. I put the insert on the base itself and then epoxied it in. Once the epoxy started to set up, I backed the base out. That way if there was any excess epoxy on top here, I didn't glue it to the blank. We want to make sure that this fits the way that the bottom of the stopper is going to meet this. So now I've got the stopper mandrel. We're going to insert that here. I always give it a couple of taps just to seat it. And then this is going to thread on. And we're good to go. The nice thing about bottle stoppers, we can cut any contour we want out of this. We can have a lot of fun. So if I had segments in here, I might want to come in and tape off or mark with a pen where I want to cut different contours. But because this is just cherry pits and transparent resin, we're just going to have some fun with it. Alright, so now we've got it pretty well rounded to where we're center with our post. You're going to notice some of the pits tend to fall out. That's not uncommon, especially using some of the carbide tools. If you're a little more aggressive, you're gonna get the seeds to pop out of the centers of these shells. When we get it closer to the finished size, we'll be a little more careful. We'll use some thin CA and coat over it. I'm going to slightly work some of this down, and then any divots we'll fill with clear CA. So as I turn this, I realize I've got a little more length than I want. I think I'm going to try to just round this top off. So rather than turn all of this, I'm going to take it to the bandsaw and I'm going to cut maybe 3/4 of an inch off the top. All right. Now I'm going to take some medium CA and I'm going to fill some of these divots before we start our sanding. I'm only going to do one hole at a time. This way it kind of helps me control it. And notice when I put the glue on, I rested the tip of the bottle up here and I just let the glue flow in. This way I'm not going to introduce a lot of air bubbles. I don't want air in my seeds. Alright, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to seal the blank itself. I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and I'm going to roll it up. Roll it up into a sleeve and then just flatten it out. So I've got a working surface to put glue on. I'm going to turn the lathe down as low as it'll go. And I'm just going to apply the ultra thin, because what I want to do is seal off any of these little cracks or anything around the seeds. I want to make sure that everything is filled. So the thing we'll do is kind of wipe it off. What this does is it stops the sanding dust from getting in any of the cracks or crevices where I don't want it. And I don't want to discolor anything. I want to leave it just seeds. So after we've got that sealed, now we'll go to sanding. If you've got glue in any high spots, what you might want to do is hit it with the tool first, lightly turn it off and get it flush. I do have a couple of bumps that I'll take off in the middle here. There we go. Much better. I'm going to start with 320 grit sandpaper. One thing to remember too is, depending on the shape you put on your stopper, it can impose some difficulty trying to get in those areas to sand it. But we're not going to get too worried about it because this is just for fun. Next we're going to hit 400 grit. Now with the cherry pits, you're never going to get it as smooth as you would straight acrylic because you've got all these transitions between resin and seeds. So we're going to put a CA finish on it though, so it's not too bad. Lastly, I like to hit it with some extra fine steel wool, and I'll turn the lathe on high for that. I know a lot of people say they don't use steel wool towards anything turning because it may catch and pull it out of your hand. If it does, I turn the lathe off, I peel it off, and I start over again. I just want to eliminate any of them deep sanding scratches and leave it a nice smooth surface. And steel wool allows me to get in some of these crevices. Alright, we're going to wipe that off real well. We don't want steel wool in our finish. Lay this across the bed so I don't get any CA on the lathe bed. Now I'm going to go back to the ultra thin, and what I like to do with this, as you sand it, you start to leave maybe some micro scratches. This will get in there and seal a lot of that as you build up to the next thickness. So I like to start thin, and then I'll go to the fill and finish orange label. Let's turn the lathe back down. I don't need to use the aerosol for this, it dries fairly quick. But it wicks in anywhere it can, and it'll fill any of them scratch marks. Nice and dry. Now we're going to switch to the orange labeled fill and finish. It's a nice flexible finish. It'll get in there real well, it'll smooth out nicely. So. When I apply the accelerator, the glue dry in between, I hold it about 10 inches away, and I just give a short burst while the lathe is moving, and that covers the area that I want without having to stop it and spray and spray and spray and spray. So it just conserves the glue dry and covers more area. Okay, after you get a couple layers of glue on there, you can stop it and turn it, and in the light you can start to see some of the low divots and spots where you may want to come in then with medium again and fill. It's cherry pits, so again, they're not perfectly smooth. You can leave them if you're comfortable with it. They are sealed. Or you can come in here and touch up afterwards. Yeah, we can also apply, for some of the really small divots, rather than trying to touch them all up, we can also apply a coat while the lathe is on. It may take a couple times to get the desired surface you want, but for the deeper ones you got to do it by hand. Individually, you got to go in there. Alright, now I'm going to switch back to the orange and see if I can level off some of this. Okay, now we're going to do our final sanding, and then we'll buff. I'm going to lightly hit it with some 400 grit. That will take down any of the high points, and then I'll switch to my micro mesh. Alright, now we're going to take it to the buffing wheel. And I'll remove my mandrel, place it back on the mandrel, and use the mandrel to buff it. Okay, we're done buffing it. We're going to take it off the mandrel. Now on the bottom here, if you want, you can rub, this is acrylic, I'm not going to get too concerned about it, but you can rub some thin CA glue over the top of that, a few layers, and then buff that. Everything's pretty well encased right now. If I had anything that was dry, or I'd worry about, I would seal that. So now we screw on the bottom, and our bottle stopper is ready for use.